So good afternoon, everyone. This is Matthew Douglas, Operations Leader at the Engineering Management Institute. We're thrilled to welcome you to EMI's Black History Month Roundtable discussion. In a moment, I'm going to be introducing our guests. We're thrilled to be able to conduct an event like this that will really highlight successful Black engineers to celebrate Black History Month. The plan for today will be for me to introduce our panel and for me to turn it over to our panelists in a couple of minutes so that they can introduce themselves. And then I'll be asking them a few questions, and we'll certainly be opening up to your questions so we can have other participants be able to chime in on some of those questions that we have and their experiences in the Black engineering world. If you happen to have any questions in the meantime, you can start to put them in the chat and we'll monitor over them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our introductions. All right, so I guess we can start at the top. Richard, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Thanks, Matt, for welcoming me on the panel here. Definitely happy to be a part. So as Matt mentioned, my name is Rich Negri. I'm the principal engineer at Geoterra Engineering Construction Consultants, which is a minority-owned firm here in the DMV area. I'm professionally licensed as an engineer in the state of New Mexico, Maryland, as well as the District of Columbia. So I hold a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Morgan State University, which is a historically Black college and university located here in Baltimore, Maryland. And I also hold a Master of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Maryland College Park. So having been professionally licensed and working as an engineer, so I should say that, I've been working as an engineer for the last 10 years. And during that 10-year period, I've been licensed since 2017. I pretty much specialized in geotechnical engineering, structural engineering for light frame structures, as well as project and construction management.
Sounds good. Ebony, would you like to go next?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ebony Larry. I also graduated from Morgan State University with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. I also have a master's in teaching from Bowie State University. I've been working in water resources for the majority of my career with a focus on sustainable water use, stormwater management, project and construction management. Currently, I serve as water resources manager at the University of Maryland College Park. I manage the operations of the central heating and power plant, and I also monitor conservation and consumption of water on the university's campus.
Sounds interesting. All right, Triston, you're up.
Awesome. We're going to have a little theme here going. Also attended the Morgan State University, got my bachelor's degree in civil engineering. So I currently work as a project manager for Jacobs Engineering. I've worked in the design build project management space, both on the engineering side and on the construction side for about the past 8 years. And I've recently made a pivot in my career to focusing in client management support for our federal construction programs and projects. I'm based in Houston, but both my projects are currently in California. So I've had the opportunity to work in Baltimore, Denver, Houston, and California with the company. And then, aside from my professional role, I do STEM speaking engagements and support STEM programs. And then I also mentor young Black males in the cities that I live in.
And awesome. So since we had those technical difficulties earlier, I do want to take some time to introduce some of the other panelists that we had on the chat. Unfortunately, they're not here to be able to speak on this, but I do want to give some kudos to them for even being willing to be participants in this panel. So the first person I'd like to introduce is going to be Tiffani Teachey. So Tiffani Teachey is a senior mechanical engineer and STEM advocate, and also a TEDx international speaker. So she is into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. She's the international best-selling author of her children's book, What Can I Be? STEM Careers from A to Z, and 2 women's empowerment books. She is the host of the Read It, Write radio show on WDRB Media. And Tiffani is the owner of Thrive Edge Publishing. Okay. And we're also going to talk a little bit about Ms. Sade Luwoye.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can participate. Yeah, I can participate through voice if that's okay.
All right, that's good. That's good. Go ahead.
Awesome. Well, sorry, y'all, we're having technical difficulties, but hopefully you all can hear me. My name is Sade Luwoye. I am a systems engineer. I work with L3Harris Technologies in Virginia, which is a aerospace and defense contractor for the government. My background, I have a bachelor's in electrical engineering from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, with a minor of mathematics, and I have a master's in systems engineering from George Washington University. I've been primarily in the system engineering DoD space for about 7-8 years, ranging from supporting programs from fighter jets, aircrafts to naval programs. Outside of work, I host a podcast called Win in STEM, basically a platform to showcase minorities that are killing it in the STEM fields. It's also my way of informal mentoring to help bring more awareness to the lack of representation in the STEM fields. So happy to be here today.
All right, thank you for introducing yourself. Last person I'm going to be introducing is going to be Mr. Dr. Kenneth Harris II. He's a senior spacecraft system engineer and a keynote speaker. Dr. Harris is the database lead engineer for the NASA J2 Joint Polar Satellite System. In this role, Mr. Harris was responsible for developing procedures and implementing processes between the flight team, instrument vendors, and spacecraft vendors, the attainment of which leads to the successful flight and data collection of the J2 satellite mission. The database utilized by both ground system and flight team will allow the satellite to be monitored and controlled from the Satellite Operations Control Center. It's really, really interesting. Dr. Kenneth Harris is actually one of my fraternity brothers and went to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County campus. So let's go ahead and move on. So the way that this is going to be conducted is we have a couple of questions, pretty popular questions, but I want everybody to kind of just chime in, to their experiences as being a Black engineer in our field. And I mean, it doesn't really matter whichever field you're in, whether it's civil engineering, electrical, systems engineering, water resources. Everybody, I believe, has had a different experience being a person of color within our field. So we just want to really be able to capture that today. So the first question that we have is, how did you find your way into an engineering career? So Triston, let's start with you.
Sure. So I actually became committed to engineering at a pretty young age, in no small part due to the encouragement and support of my parents, who, really recognized my interests at a young age and kind of the skills that I demonstrated. And so they sought out programs that helped me to harness those skills. But also an important part of my growth into engineering is the mentors that, guided me and provided opportunities for me. So when I say from a young age, I want to say as early as 5th grade, I participated in STEM summer camps, the National Society of Black Engineers, pre-college initiative. And, I also attended a science and technology high school. So, choosing engineering was pretty much the easy part for me. The more challenging part was really narrowing down which discipline I wanted to focus in, and then, throughout my collegiate path, and then what I wanted to do with my, civil engineering degree, upon graduation. So that's kind of my path to engineering.
Okay. What about you, Sade?
So for me, I think my story is a little different. Growing up, I've always loved technology. Math was my favorite course, but I didn't have any guidance or anyone in my family that was in engineering or either STEM at all. I actually took a career personality test in high school to see what career fit me. And I ended up coming up into engineering. Fortunately, in high school, I was able to intern for a professor at Brown University who owned his own semiconductor engineering startup. And that was really my opportunity that exposed me to engineering and the various career fields within it. So that definitely helped me steer my career in engineering, majored it in college, and then continued with it after graduating.
Okay. Sounds good. So I'll chime in on this one. So for me, I had a different start. As a kid, I used to really enjoy just putting things together. I mean, like kind of cliche, but you know, whatever. My parents used to go and get furniture from IKEA, and I always used to beg them to put it together. So I got to start there. But I was also very into art and drawing. So I thought that I was kind of destined either to be an artist or an engineer, either one of the two. So I kind of picked architecture at first, but talking with my parents about it, we decided that that might not be a path that I actually wanted to explore. So I tried out civil engineering at Morgan State University, and I ended up liking it. I met a bunch of people that was there that I added into my network that have certainly added a lot of value into my life and kind of steered me on the right direction. And now I'm here. So now I'm kind of able to encompass all of the skills that I've gathered over the last couple of years. And now I'm primarily focused on construction by way of public works for the most part. So that's how I got to this point. So let's go ahead on to the next question. What are some of the challenges you face as a Black engineer? Richard, let's start with you.
Sure, definitely a great question. I would say for me personally, my experiences of some of the challenges that I faced as a Black engineer have definitely been feeling like you constantly have to prove yourself, particularly your worth, in order to either remain in your position or even to advance. I will say that on that note, I would actually recommend a really good book that I'm actually reading now that better articulates this idea well enough, that I would highly recommend that folks read. It's a book called Good Is Not Enough and Other Unwritten Rules for Minority Professionals by Keith R. Weish. Hopefully I didn't butcher his last name. So I'm only a few chapters in, but it's definitely a great book that I would recommend. Really because it provides some kind of solace and peace of mind of knowing that, you know, as a Black engineer, that the challenges of being a Black engineer in terms of having to constantly prove yourself and, you know, to maintain your position in your current position or even to advance is not something where, you know, you're isolated in. It seems to be something that plagues a lot of professionals outside of not only engineering, but in other professional industries as well. So I would definitely say for me that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I've personally experienced.
Okay. And what about you, Ebony?
As a Black female civil engineer, I would say that the biggest challenge is just being the only one all the time. In addition to that, work-life balance is hard. I'm married and I have children, so it definitely has been an adjustment to really figure out how to touch all bases, excel in my job, make sure home is taken care of, but most importantly, make sure that I have something left for myself. And then another big challenge is just when I guess like the code switching piece, but when I come to work, I have to be a different person than I am outside. And though I've been able to work on that a lot, and I wouldn't say that I'm not myself at work, but outside of work, I like to be like fun and soft and feminine. And at work, I have to be strong and assertive and always sure of myself. And so that switch can be hard. It can be hard to not be strong and assertive and demanding outside of work when I don't need to be.
Okay, for me, I haven't necessarily faced a lot of challenges. I would say that the only real challenge I can really say that I faced is probably like being selected as it relates to internships just coming from a HBCU, like a lesser what other people like to think is a lesser known college or university. Some people are still on that mindset where they think that smaller universities means like smaller brain, and that's really not the case at all, because Morgan State has a stellar program. So that's one challenge that I faced. Other than that, I could say that I might have faced some opposition as it related to kind of moving up the ladder. Actually, kind of recently, that's something that I kind of dealt with, but that's a story for another day. Let's move on to the next question. What do you wish you had done during your time in college that could have helped you in your life or career? Tiffani, are you on right now? Are you able to speak? I think we can. Okay, I see that you're on. I'm trying to see if I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. Are you able to say anything to this one? Jared says in the chat, yeah, code switching is straight up exhausting at times. I can agree. I can agree.
Yeah,
I'm not able to.
She can't speak, but I think Sade might be able.
Okay, yeah, I see that now. Anybody have any experiences with code switching?
I think Sade wants to speak.
Okay, you can go ahead, Sade. Are you able to say anything?
Yeah, the question is code switching or the tips, or what we wish we knew in college?
You can speak to either one. Let's focus on what we have on the screen right now, and then we can talk about the code switching after that one. It'll be like a secondary question.
Okay, sure. I guess in college, I wish I knew the importance of mentorship. Right now, I think in my professional career, that's where I really knew how mentoring and people in your circle can really get you far. There's a saying, it's not what you know, is who you know. If I had a mentor in college just to make sure I was going on the right paths, ask them questions on what's going on in the industry, what should I be working on, what particular classes should I be taking, or just help me with that transition from college life to career. I think that would be very beneficial to me at the moment. So right now, when I talk to college students, I always let them know the importance of mentoring. If they can find a mentor, either an upperclassman at their college or a professional mentor, definitely can take you far.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment for sure. You know, I mentioned that I continue to mentor in the community, both STEM and just young Black males. And that's one of the things I always, you know, share with them is my experience with mentors. And then just also understanding that one person can't be everything for you as a mentor, right? So you mentioned having a professional mentor, having more of a personal mentor, a financial mentor. So being able to separate that and leverage the skills that mentor shares or can share with you, but also to understand that mentoring is really a symbiotic relationship. It's not someone taking from someone else, right? You guys form that relationship to where you may be able to offer some assistance to them in some way, or even just expand their thinking, expand their perspective because of, you know, what you bring to the table. So I definitely agree with your point, Sade.
And this is Tiffani. I just wanted to say, I do wish I would have did study abroad. That's one thing I think, if I go back to it, I wish I would have did study abroad. So thank you. Y'all can hear me now. I'm here.
Yes.
So, but I'm chiming in now. One thing I do wish I could have did is study abroad, but I don't know if it could have been tied with the engineering portion of it, but I do wish sometimes I would have did that during school time. So that's one thing. But
Matt,
definitely, yeah. Go ahead.
So, Matt, I think it's funny that you said that you were thinking about architecture before civil engineering, because I actually was too. One thing that really made me want to get into engineering was when I was at Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, I had an architectural drawing class and I loved it. But then some other things happened. I chose civil engineering. So to address the question, I did 2 years at Howard and then I did 2.5 years at Morgan. So what I would have done differently at Howard was I would have changed changed my major to architecture because I realized at the end of my freshman year that that's what I wanted to do. But I was just like, well, I already started, so I'm gonna just finish it. But that would have helped me be more happy in my career and satisfied. But then when I got to Morgan, one decision that I wouldn't say I regret it, but if I had the chance to do it over again, I would have just taken the fundamental engineering exam when I was in college.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah,
Let's talk.
so it's not necessarily that I wish that I had done it. I just acknowledge that it would have helped me in my career.
Yeah, I want to chime in on that fundamentals of engineering exam, because I know that Ebony, like yourself, I mean, I also have little ones, you know, in the family and all of that, and it really does become busy after you have, you know, people that you actually need to take care of. Like when your responsibilities increase, you just don't really have the same amount of time anymore. So that's probably my biggest pitfall, my biggest regret was not taking the time to do that beforehand. I mean, in my defense, I thought that I was getting into the construction industry and it wasn't necessarily needed. And, you know, having to get out of school and I'm just like, oh, well, I'm done with tests. I don't want to do this anymore, the whole studying thing. And I thought that it was okay. And then I saw that, wow, like this is really the gatekeeper from, you know, getting to that next level. Because now I'm at the level where it's like, I'm at the ceiling, you know what I mean? So like, I'm trying to get further up the ladder, but getting further up the ladder definitely requires that you have that professional engineer's license. So anybody out there that is listening, like you have to get certifications, advanced degrees if needed. They definitely help, you know, like they prove to your upper management that you're actually willing to do the work to be considered. And on top of that, I mean, like you have to have some letters after your name if you're going to be signing off on projects. That's just it. It's a marketability thing. It's a knowledge base. It's very, very important.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. I do want to chime in on this comment because I definitely want to echo everyone's sentiments about getting professionally licensed, and definitely want to emphasize it's not really the primary point that I wanted to make to answer this question, but since we're on the topic of professional licensing, yeah, it's extremely important. And the earlier you get it, the better. Yes, it does have, you know, an extremely high amount of earning potential associated with it. But the other part that I want people to recognize with becoming a licensed professional engineer is the responsibility that comes with it. It's definitely a huge responsibility. It's a huge undertaking. To not only become a professionally licensed engineer, but as you mentioned, you know, being able to sign off on designs, being able to, you know, sign off on post-construction work that's been done, you know, you're assuming a lot of liability. So it requires you to really understand your particular chosen field within engineering, because within engineering, you know, it's pretty vast, you know, so even within civil engineering, you know, Ebony within water resources, myself, my background in geotechnical and structures, you know, then there's environmental. So just within the discipline of civil itself, it can get pretty vast. So becoming a licensed engineer, there's a huge amount of responsibility in making sure that you're competent in your chosen field within that sub-discipline of engineering. But moving on slightly beyond that, what I really wanted to impress upon in terms of what I wish I had done differently in college, and what I would like to impress upon those who may be in college now or looking to pursue either a STEM degree or any degree, is that I think it's extremely important to take financial literacy classes, whether it's offered through your institution or a reputable source. Becoming financially literate is imperative to your success in life and your career, especially as it relates to funding your education, and being able to negotiate salaries post graduation. So for many within our community, the cost of higher education can be crippling, especially postgraduate. So, you know, being smart and being cognizant of the cost that can have a significant impact on your quality of life postgraduate is extremely important. So the earlier that you become financially literate, the better.
Can I say one thing to piggyback off of what Rich just said?
Sure, absolutely.
So one thing, like a piece of advice that I want to give that somebody gave to me, like in my senior year of college was, okay, I got to think about it again. Okay, so think about if you're after your senior year. So if you go into a 5th year of college, then, and let's say your tuition is $25,000 a year, hopefully, then you're going to spend that $25,000 a year in your 5th year of college. If you would have graduated after 4 years, then you would go on to get a job, hopefully, and you would make, I don't know, $60,000 coming out of college. So when you talk about finances, that's also important. Like engineering is hard, but you want to push through and get out so that you're not racking up tuition costs. You want to get out so that you can make money.
Right. No, that's pivotal. Anybody else have anything to add on to that? Any participants want to add on to that? Okay, let's move on to the next question then. So have you ever faced any disparities within the workplace because of your race? And if so, how do you propose we combat these? If anybody would like to chime in, just go ahead and speak.
Hey, Matt, I can go ahead. So recounting my own personal feelings in a number of past situations, I would definitely say absolutely. You know, we face a number of different disparities. However, I also do kind of feel like the question is a little bit difficult to answer with specifics because oftentimes the burden of proof is on you as a complainant in these types of situations. And also you're likely, you know, reporting these disparities to individuals who may not look like you or have difficulty believing your experience to be true. And that's given that they can't emphasize or fathom your perspective. And within itself is an issue. So as a potential solution to kind of combat these issues, we definitely need a more direct approach to bridging maybe the understanding gap between the experiences of different races. I think a particular educator on the subject that I would recommend as a good starting point is definitely Jane Elliott.
So I think I've had a little bit of a different experience. Similar to Rich, I would say it would be hard for me to pinpoint an exact example. Obviously, I think it's one of the questions, but microaggressions, right? We've all experienced those things, but that's not really that. Most of the time, that doesn't have a tangible effect on, you know, what I do as my role. I will say that gratefully, I think, as far as the firm that I've worked for most of my career, they do place an emphasis on us as individuals being able to bring our whole selves to work. I feel completely supported at Jacobs as a Black employee because of things like our Black Employee Network group. You'll see that's my background right now. The support provided to initiatives that I am passionate about, such as NSBE. And then most recently, Jacobs rolled out an action plan for advancing justice and equality following the protests in 2020. So I definitely feel that support. And I think that for me, a lot of the challenges that I face deal more so with my age. So I don't want to say it's ageism per se, but definitely being one of the youngest people in the room, especially in a leadership position on these projects, I definitely have to constantly prove myself. And it may be exacerbated because I'm also Black, but I attribute more of my challenges to that as opposed to mainly my race.
I'll speak on that as well. So like it's kind of like to your point, like it is kind of hard to pinpoint an exact time of when that, like I might have faced like some type of microaggression or anything of that matter. But I could say that like I might have faced some type of disparity as it relates to age. And it happens a lot more than we actually think it does. I think like within the construction industry, especially. And that's just my own prior experience. But, you know, usually when you're working like within a Department of Public Works, you have a lot of other guys that have just been doing this for 30, 40 years. You know, like this is all that they know and do. So me coming in a management position and I'm trying to say like, okay, well, this is what we're doing. This is the process that we're implementing. It does become a little bit difficult to try to actually like gain that respect. So I'd say that ageism definitely is a part to play. And
Can I?
I think that kind of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want to speak after you. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I think that ageism is a huge part to play, especially since like within the construction industry, like there are a lot of trades, and a lot of those trades don't necessarily like require a degree. It just requires like a skill set or, you know, like a distribution of time. But then coming in with a degree within that into that field puts you at like a higher position than that person that was doing that trade for such a long time. So the ageism kind of presents an obstacle where a lot of the skilled tradesmen probably would take a guess that you think that you're better than them, or they just are used to just the old way of thinking. And it really does paint a problem, you know, when trying to get the respect or trying to, you know, like achieve a certain, you know, a certain goal.
Yeah, sometimes they come right out and say it too, don't they?
Yeah.
So, okay, so not only ageism or race and everything, I want to speak on as a female in a male-dominated field. I got to speak on that experience. So I had an opportunity. I'm 18 years in the industry, about to be 19, and I walked into a conference room, and male, all men in there, in small conference room. The vendor, who's the part we're going to deal with, shook hands with everybody except for me, and so I've experienced it. I shook hands and said, by the way, my name is Tiffani Teachey. I'm the responsible engineer. So basically, we're going to decide if we're going to use his equipment or not for what we're going to do. And so it brings perspective where you got to sometimes not check them, but make sure that they understand that you're just as competent and capable of getting the job done. So a lot of times we, as females, Black females, you can talk about the race and the gender piece. It's a whole we're a double minority. And so we can be considered as an admin sometimes. We take notes and stuff. So we sometimes have to speak up and make sure that we are just showing that we're competent as well. I am getting my PhD at North Carolina A&T right now, and my dissertation.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's tied in with the barriers for Black women in STEM leadership to advance, especially in the C-suite and stuff like this. And so this is his home, definitely for especially in the field that we're in. So I just want to at least highlight that. And how we can make sure that we step up and speak out as well. Thanks.
Can I ask you a follow-up, Tiffani? Because, you know, one of my best friends, you know, shares some of the same experiences that you have. And so I'm just curious, you know, as a man, you know, there are some things that I don't experience, right? You know, I am able to be more forceful and, you know, sometimes yell when I need to, right? In a more construction environment. Do you find yourself being able to assert yourself over those men, or do you still face challenges where they push back, even though you are, you know, at the top of the food chain in that environment?
And it varies depending on the situation, but regardless, you can't let them step over you. Regardless, it's the whole having to prove ourselves. The whole having to show that we're just as competent. But I mean, I still stand my ground. I'm in the room. I mean, I'm in there. And so it's a part of the process of letting them know the competency and we're capable. And yeah, I mean, no, I'm not going to be timid, but then it's the whole angry Black woman. It's all those type of stereotypes that we have to deal with as well. But at the end of the day, we're trying to get the job done. We're trying to work together. And that's the thing we have to make sure that they understand when it comes to the project works that we do. So it's every day it's a challenge. I went into this because I knew it was going to be a challenge, but we know what we got to do to get the job done at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, there was a comment that I actually just got from a one of the attendees in this webinar, Mr. Houston, or Mrs. Houston, I'm sorry. But they had said, as a Black engineer in the position where I have to lead other engineers who are also older, I have found that sometimes respect is not earned, but sometimes has to be commanded. And I think that that's absolute truth. You know, like sometimes you just have to step into a room and really demand that respect. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But I mean, it's all trial and error.
And if I can add one thing, so I definitely resonate with Tiffany. I fall into that category, being young, being Black and a female. But what I noticed that really helped me combat these issues is having allies. A lot of these challenges I've come across with will not really be with my coworkers, will be with the customers. And these customers can be from like the Air Force and Navy. But having my coworkers being there to validate what I'm saying, to validate my work ethic, really has helped me overcome those type of challenges.
I would like to speak about my experiences. Tristan made a really good point that microaggressions don't really affect your day-to-day work, but maybe about 5 years ago, I noticed that microaggressions were severely affecting my mental health. And at the time, I didn't even really understand what a microaggression was. I just noticed that when I would get home from work, I just felt awful. And I started to have to really retrace and back to when did I start to feel this way? And I realized that it was, oh, when such and such made this comment to me when I was at work. So I can think of like 4 microaggressions just this week. Today, I walked down to a site where they're fixing a water main leak. And it was a guy on the crew that I've never met before. And so he asked me like, oh, are you in the construction field? He asked me a couple questions, but I was working. So I was trying to talk to him too. And then he's told me that he thinks I'm too pretty to work in this field. And he probably thought that was a compliment, but it's not. And it's annoying. So, and he was a Black man. So microaggressions don't even have to come from the other side. So that's something that I've really had to work on within myself, because I can't control what other people do, but I do have to control my reaction to it and make sure that it doesn't affect me on such a deep level. And I think that once I was able to work through that, I did away with that mentality that I have to prove myself. So I come into the room, I command respect, and my work is going to show for itself. Also, in building that confidence, I realized that a lot of the people around me are not always that competent. So that's my piece.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Let's move on to the next question. Well, we already talked about microaggressions, so let's skip past this one. In your opinion, what is the stereotype of an engineer? Do you find yourself having to conform to that stereotype? And if you do, what does that mean for you? How do you conduct yourself in the workspace? Rich, let's hear from you on this one.
It's funny, I had a feeling you'd call me on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, man, the stereotype of an engineer, what's interesting is I get kind of, I'm naturally an introverted person, so I kind of would, fit in kind of perfectly as, your stereotypical engineer, introverted, kind of to themselves, really kind of by the book and regimented. But even though I am an introvert, I have very extroverted tendencies. So a lot of clients that I work with, a lot of times when I show up on site, it's kind of hard for them to figure that I'm an engineer, particularly because which kind of ties into some of the earlier stuff that we talked about regarding microaggressions and disparities in the workplace. They don't necessarily see me as an engineer because some of the first questions they'll ask me if I come on site or if I'm in a meeting, they're like, "Oh, hey man, like where'd you play basketball?" And because I'm 6'3", I'm African American male. And usually that's the first question. I'm just like, hey, it kind of strikes me by surprise because I'm in a room full of engineers, and the first question you want to ask me is, did I play basketball?
That's racist.
It's a microaggression.
Yeah, it's definitely
a question, but why did you
microaggression
make
for sure.
that guess?
Yeah.
Obviously it's a joke, but
Yeah, and definitely to set the record straight, I'm not that talented at basketball. So
I was about to
it's
say, yeah.
yeah. So when in terms of conforming to the stereotype, I definitely don't. I definitely am the type of person where I'm very I like to have interpersonal relationships with people. I like to be able to have conversations, get to know them. Because then it kind of gives me an idea in terms of how they are as a person, how I need to be, how I need to engage with them on the project. And oftentimes I noticed that that's helped me significantly in my career because not only do you learn a lot by being open to you know um, other people's experiences, especially within the engineering and construction industry, where sometimes those disparities, as we mentioned, can be by age and experience in the industry. Um, and even though those things that similar to I guess Tiffany and Sade had mentioned, as well as Ebony had mentioned, in terms of being for themselves being as double minorities, taking that as an engineer, as a black male, is realizing that I'm in a position of quote unquote power as an engineer, because that goes back to that responsibility piece I was discussing earlier. And as Yusin had mentioned, having to also command respect. And it's trying to find that right balance of obviously being understanding of who you are as a person, because we can't change the fact that we're minorities, um, and also kind of reading the room a bit and trying to understand, like, all right, who exactly are we dealing with? It's one thing to be like, okay, I'm here with engineers and builders, but who are they as people? And it's kind of being mindful of, like, okay, this person's treating me such and such type of way. And it's like, all right, well, how am I going to engage? Because at the end of the day, I still need to, I still have a job to do. I still have my responsibilities, and I have my goals that I'm trying to reach. So I definitely don't think that I would fall into, you know, being a stereotypical engineer. But I do find myself having to, police myself in the workspace. I think Ebony had mentioned it earlier, where you have to be one way at work and a completely different way, when you're at home. And it would be nice to have, honestly, the luxury to be who you are at home, who you are at work. It's you can be on the phone with friends and having a heated debate about something that you might have a difference in opinion with, but if you try to take a similar type of conversation at work, it might not go off as well. So definitely as an engineer myself, I don't think I follow the stereotypical introverted, stay to myself type of engineer, and I think I'm always right
Mhm.
kind of situation. I'm more of the, hey, I'm open to having a intelligent conversation, a respectful conversation, where it's collaborative and we can work together for a common goal, a common mission. And I just hope that whatever the differences are between us, whether it's age, race, or experience in the industry, that can be set aside for the overall goal of achieving the project.
Anybody else want to chime in?
I can
Tiffany,
say,
I would like
yeah,
to.
I can
Okay.
say that.
Mhm.
I'm not your average engineer, no, at all. But as many have heard, I guess, about my intro, the stereotype, of course, is, and I do my speech to the kids. I love the kids, you guys. And I show a screen of in fun engineering. I say, is this what an engineer looks like? And it's like, it's a male, white male with glasses, nerdy looking and all that. So I go to the next page and I say, is this what an engineer looks like? And so I show them we're diverse, we look all different ways. And so I start by trying to tell the kids, that's not what we all are look like and all we're about. And so I try to start early and engaging them to know, yes, this is what some engineers might look like, but this is not what we are about. And so I try to encourage that. So no, I'm not your average engineer performing, but I stick to making sure I get the job done when I'm at work, working as a team. Those parts are important. When I say I'm not your average engineer, because I also wrote a book. I'm a children's book author, so I have the the creative side of me from the outside
Mhm.
side, still tying in the STEM part of it. So you can still have other facets of you and not lose yourself in the process is what I would say in conducting yourself at the workspace. Thanks.
Tiffany, I was going to say, just feel free to either drop your the link to buy your resources here in the chat, and also send it to me so that when we post the webinar on our social media platforms, people that can actually like reference to it in case they want to make a purchase for their own children.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Does
And
anybody else
Rich,
wanna
can you
speak?
put that other book title in the chat, the one that you recommended? And I can answer the
Yeah.
question.
Okay, sure.
So yeah, like everybody said, I think the stereotype for an engineer is just like a nerdy white man, like a pen protector and stuff. So,
We're
but
waiting for somebody
also
to say it, you know, but
I'm also a teacher, so I've done a lot of STEM programming. I'm also a math teacher. I left engineering for 2 years to go be a teacher. And when I would speak to a lot of the younger kids about being an engineer, they would think that I do something on a train. So that's another reason why I'm so passionate about STEM programming and really just being a trailblazer, because we just need to educate our children better. So I would say that no, I don't conform to the stereotype, because probably once a week somebody tells me that I don't look like an engineer, or they're like, "Oh, you're an engineer." So, but I'm proud of that. It can be a bit of a struggle though, because I stick out like a sore thumb. So, that brings on a lot of that attention and microaggressions and things like that. But basically, how I conduct myself in the workplace, I try my best to still be myself. I'm not really an introvert. Like, I like to, talk to people, build relationships. So I think Rich maybe was saying that like you just have to pay attention to how people react to you and treat you. So I kind of read the room. Like, I just started this job like back in November. I started out really quiet, just observing everybody, how people interact with one another. So I was able to get a good idea of who my resources would be, people that I could lean on. And then like now I've started to open up. But I don't have a lot of like personal conversations, and I just keep it very cordial and friendly and work based.
Yeah,
Good
I'm the
point.
same way. Which,
Yeah, personal conversations are no.
but I mean,
Not for me.
that I think part of the point of this call is none of us are stereotypical engineers, because it's such a white male dominated space, right? Everyone on this call stands out, and that's why we're able to have this discussion, because we have some of those same experiences, and just us sharing those experiences, validating each other, letting us know that we're not the only one, is why this call is very important for us as panelists, but also the participants on the call. I think a couple of things that were raised in the chat echo my experiences. Through this question specifically, a lot of what we've talked about is code switching, right? And for the longest, so like my hair is out right now, is in a curly fro, but for the longest, I would keep my hair short. Now that it's longer, I would. This was the starting point, but sometimes I like to get twists, cornrows, braids, right? But I struggled with doing that because of how I perceive that others may look at me, and either respect or not respect me because of that, and therefore not respect my role in leadership because of how I looked or how I dressed. Now, granted, I consider myself a pretty good dresser in general, but there would be days when I really didn't feel like it. But because, again, I felt like I had to put on that facade, so that others would not change their opinion of me or respect my role in leadership. So I think one other thing that I wanted to highlight as it related to this question is sometimes sticking out is what gets us the promotion. It's sometimes what gets us the recognition that we deserve rightfully. Houston mentioned earlier, commanding the room with respect. I'm going to use a quick anecdote of when I guess this was 2 roles ago. I was managing the quality control for engineering quality control for a $150 million design, and my budgeted quality was $60 million. I had never dealt with that much money in my life, right? But leadership saw that I could handle it because I was able to organize a kickoff meeting for that design with over 100 engineers, mostly older white men, a lot of South Asians with credentials after their name, right? But I was able to command that room because, I am extroverted as opposed to most engineers. I am good at public speaking and practice public speaking through organizations such as NSBE and things like that. So because I stood out, senior leadership was able to see me in a different role, in a different light than they would have otherwise if I was just going about the day-to-day and not stepping up and taking those opportunities.
I think that you mentioned something real quick. We will be going on to the next question pretty soon, but one thing that you did mention there was just, good old NSBE. And I just want to point out to everyone that's a listener on here right now that NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers, is by far one of the best organizations that you can join as a undergraduate student in order for you to develop yourself as an up-and-coming engineer. Like, absolutely. You meet and network with so many different professionals. The conferences are great. There's career fairs and just different events for you to go to in different parts of the country where you can really be a part of a network of engineers that are Black, that are actually doing something with their lives. So I would encourage everyone to look into a local chapter. I'm not exactly sure if they do any graduate chapters or anything like that, or anything that's like a post-grad involvement. But I just know from my own experience that those were my first experiences actually understanding Robert's rules of order, like actually understanding like how meetings are to be conducted, how to tie a tie, how to put on a suit correctly, matching, networking, interviewing, how to create a resume. So if you can take some time to look at nesbe.org. Thank you, Cortez, for putting that link into the chat. And just take a little bit of time to learn about them and see if you actually have a chapter on your campus if you still are in undergrad, and try to take advantage of that.
Can I put a plug real quick? So if you are, once you do graduate, you get that first year free. So I'm all about NSBE, y'all. I'm like lifetime member, you name it. So you do get that first year free. So do take advantage of NSBE. The first year is free once you graduate. But yeah, while you're in college, take advantage of it. And be active in the professionals chapter. I'm in the professionals chapter too. So it's all different levels you can take part with NSBE. So thank you for bringing that up. I am a NSBE, all about that. So thanks.
Same.
Good.
Glad to do it.
Can I talk about hair? Triston said something.
Yes.
So before, like when I first graduated, I did feel like I had to have my hair a certain way, like straighten my hair. And then I don't anymore. I like to get different hairstyles. That's something that like makes me happy, but I always have really bad anxiety about coming to work. Like during COVID, it was awesome. I can have my hair however I want to. But like, so I noticed that the last time I got my hair braided, I'm like, oh, and so I prepared for that, but it's like somebody's going to say something stupid. So as soon as I got to work, my boss was like, oh, I didn't know your hair was that long. And these braids are long, y'all. It was just like, oh, here we go. But that's a real thing. But I would just suggest be yourself. Like, if you're comfortable, it doesn't matter how comfortable anybody else is or not. But I also have like tattoos and piercings and stuff too. I don't care about any of that.
I was about to say, look, as long as you're bringing them money, there's nothing that they can really say to you. As long as you're getting projects done, you should be fine. Just make sure that you can back up you know, all of the hair and tattoos and everything else. Because I have the same thing, but you really just have to be able to live up to what you're portraying to them.
You got hair?
Right, I
didn't
was like,
say
you
that.
up to the hair.
Yeah. Like, as
Everybody
long
see
as
that.
those things don't define you, as long as those things
Right,
don't define
right.
you, they don't matter, and don't allow someone to make that define you.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
don't let somebody say something about your hair every day, or like don't allow that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely agree to that point. Even though I normally keep my hair cut short, I've actually had people ask me questions about having a lineup. Like they're like, "Oh man, why is your hairline so perfectly straight?"
Mhm.
Like, really? Like,
Way
come on,
God
man.
made me.
Yeah,
Even having a beard sometimes like does present some an issue sometimes, because in like civil engineering specifically is kind of very sectored. You know, like in construction, you might have somebody that has a beard all the way out to here, you know, like all the way down to their knees, no problem. But in some other professions, like water resources engineering, or like if you're an assistant director or director of public works, or you're a director of engineering, a vice president for a firm, sometimes like the look has to be the part. I've not really seen a lot of instances where you have a professional that has like either like a long beard or a certain type of look to their hair. They kind of dress the stereotype of like looking a certain type of way for you to like actually be the part and gain some type of respect, which kind of gives us this notion that you have to look a certain type of way. I just wanted to put that out there. But now on to the next question. In a few words, could you give some advice to future engineers like us on how to succeed in their careers? And I think that we kind of already talked about this a little bit. As far as joining NSBE, that's first and foremost. Like that's absolute number one. Next, any other tips that we have for any engineers that are looking to become an engineer in the future?
yeah, definitely echoing some of my points from earlier. Definitely learning and practicing financial literacy. Finding like-minded mentors through professional organizations, and definitely reading that book, Good is Not Enough. I'll drop it again in the chat for you guys, in case anyone missed it. But yeah, definitely those three I would like to echo.
And I like to add, not just NSBE, but also join like other professional organizations in your fields. I know electricals, we have IEEE, or even just groups like Blacks in Techs, or just different organizations that you can tap into to learn more about the industry and also to seek mentorship.
I would say always be a learner, and like just constantly grow your craft, whatever that may be. Never like get stuck and feel like you have to stay somewhere doing something that you don't want to do. Like I said, at the end of 2020, I decided I don't want to be an engineer anymore. I don't want to work at home and be an essential employee with my 2 small children. I want to do something else. And I went into STEM programming. And then I came right back to engineering. Like, and I think that's one thing that's helped me throughout my career, is knowing that I can always get a job. I can always do better. I'm always needed somewhere. So, but the most important thing is that I'm comfortable and happy where I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually little promo. I had a video with EMI a couple of weeks back where I talked about 5 different tips that up and coming engineers or engineers that are already in the profession can have in their mind for, you know, leveling up within their career. And the 5 tips are to remain a student, to welcome critique, to continue networking, filling in the gap, and always being hungry. I think that if you just maintain any one of those 5 points, you're definitely going to be on the right path to being a successful engineer in the future.
I really like that welcoming critique part. I know that's helped me immensely in my career so far. Just being able to always request that feedback and then implement it as well. I think what I wanted to highlight is a lot of what we discussed as it relates to working at a specific company is about the culture of that company. And so I think my advice would be for it, even if you're a mid-level professional, whatever, entry level, senior level, when you're looking to go into a new company, focus on that culture aspect. Ask the recruiters, but not only recruiters, if you're able to ask like HR staff, right, who has that canned response, but if you can ask others about the culture. I've highlighted Jacob's culture. I'm a huge proponent of it. Like I said, I feel very comfortable in being myself at work, and then preparing for it, because the landscape is ever changing. I mean, when we all started, 10 years, 12, however many, 18 years ago, I'm sure the culture in the industry as a whole has shifted. I know it's shifted from when I started with my company. So, there is a lot of focus on diversity, equality, and inclusion now, but there's also some criticism of it too. So just kind of being aware of that and preparing for that as best as you can.
Yeah.
Someone in the chat.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead,
I think
you got it.
Cortez in the chat just said like internships and fellowships. That's something that's very important. That was like fundamental for my career. I think like my first year after the first summer after my freshman year of college, I had an internship at this company called Bith Group Technologies in Baltimore, Black owned. And then I went on, once I started at Morgan, I had an internship with the State Highway Administration throughout my whole time there. And like, that was just like catalytic. My supervisor was just like so supportive. He gave me like a lot of autonomy with my job. I was able to lead meetings, and this was before I even graduated from college. So then once I graduated, it was like much easier to establish myself in the workplace because I had already been in an engineering setting for so long. So that's really important, just like getting any kind of work experience that you can, because I did stuff with like biomedical engineering, electrical and systems. I was just getting work experience before I decided, okay, I'm gonna go into civil engineering.
Yeah, and to your point on that, I also wanted to add in, like, and it goes with number 5, like my point number 5 with the be hungry. Like, you really have to keep your foot on the gas when you're in school. You may not be the best one, like at your classes, but making sure that you at least get one internship is just the key that you need to unlock a whole gateway of opportunities. Just for me specifically, once I got my first internship, every year after that, I had another internship, because I was one of the engineers, like our points before, that were not the typical engineers. I was very good at speaking. I was very good at interviewing. So me being able to have that one internship, after that, it was just a domino effect. Everything kind of just lined up in there. I've worked with Fortune 500 companies, and I've worked with smaller companies that I only have about 50 people. But just being hungry and keeping your foot on the gas that way is a great way to ensure that, like your resume is full, that you're gaining the experience, that you're networking with the people that you need to be networking with, that you're taking up as much knowledge as you possibly can. Because, I mean, once a job's, like a lot of these jobs out here now are asking that you have 1, 2, 3 years of experience already starting out of college. That means basically that you need to already have had an internship at that point in time, which for some people is a little bit hard to do. So I would focus on, like when you're in school, do your classes during the fall and spring semester. But in the summertime, you need to be working, getting an internship, making sure that you're getting that experience that you need. The next tip that I would have would be to just don't be afraid of change. Like if something is not fitting for you, you have to move on to the next, make it fit some type of way, or you bounce on to the next thing to a better situation for you. Whatever you have to do to find a place where you can actually fit snugly and you can actually grow and foster in a well-fostered environment for yourself, do that, because that's going to be very pivotal to your success later on in life. And Richard put into the chat, and pursue professional licensure. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Do it while you're in school, because doing it after school is done, you start to get into the day-to-day of life. You get used to not being in school, and it becomes a lot harder for you to retain all of that information. So the easiest way for you to get it is by doing it either while you're in school or right after you're done with school. Get it scheduled right now, do your research, get yourself into classes, even get your immediate job that you get after you graduate from your, school with your degree. Get them to pay for it. I know for instance, my previous job, they were offering tuition reimbursement for me to go ahead and take a 3-4 month class, for me to study for my FE and my PE license. They also do the same exact thing if you're getting like a CCM, if you're getting a PMP, even if you're getting your master's degree in certain aspects, they will pay for that. Just use it to your advantage. Right. Any other tips that we have for this question? All right, let's move on. This is the last question on the panel. If you could talk to your past version of yourself, what advice would you give?
I would tell myself to go to therapy.
That's important. That's really, really important.
That would have helped with everything that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you come into these white dominated spaces, they don't understand what you're going through in your life. You have to put all of that stuff away and go into work and perform. Whatever is going on is all playing a part on your psyche, your mental health, and turn your physical health. So I would say to many past versions of myself to go to therapy.
Yeah, I definitely echo Ebony's sentiments. I was very fortunate to have started, I guess, or to have gotten my undergraduate degree from Morgan State, which is, obviously an HBCU. Because prior to that, I attended predominantly, Caucasian schools where, I was always within the minority. I was always a minority. And my experiences from going from predominantly Caucasian schools to an HBCU, it was really eye-opening. Even at first, it was a culture shock for me to be around, people that look like me. But then the amount of support and encouragement that I got, it really changed my trajectory. I honestly would have never pictured myself here if it hadn't have been for my experience at Morgan State. So definitely going back, I would definitely have told myself like, hey, don't be so naive. Not everyone who smiles at you or is nice to you is actually your friend or has your best interest in mind. Also knowing that even though that you want to continue to put your best foot forward and be confident in what you do, that to some people who may not look like you, the line between confidence and arrogance is extremely fine, and very delicate. So even in situations where you should you should essentially have the ability to command rooms or lead, it's not always respected in those senses. So just being prepared for that. So the mental health aspect associated with that is extremely huge, because I know this past year was a very I shouldn't say just this past last year, but since the pandemic, prior to the position that I was in now, it was very stressful, very, very stressful, because you get to a point in your career where you feel as though you're excelling, you're climbing, and it's corroborated by some of your peers. You might be earning awards, you're getting recognition, but all of that can change at the drop of a hat. The minute that they no longer either see you as useful or competent to their standards, they will likely find ways to either push you out or get rid of you. So, being able to being prepared for that mentally is extremely important. So I definitely echo Ebony's sentiments. If I were to go back and go back to past version myself, I would definitely advise myself to seek therapy early and often, for sure. On top of, again, I'm going to echo, learning and practicing financial literacy, maintaining good networking, maintaining good relationships within your network, pursuing, professional licensure early, because I didn't study for the FE until I think 2 years postgraduate, and even though I was a single male at the time, even then it was difficult. So I can only imagine for those that have a family how difficult it is to pursue licensure at that time. So, yeah.
All right, Triston, want to chime in?
No, I think both Ebony and Rich really summed it up well. So I'm gonna let that one sit.
We got a question in the chat. What kind of questions were you asking that helped you get through the therapy? I just don't know how to put it in question form in order to learn from it. I don't ask a lot of questions in therapy. I talk a lot about my experiences and how they make me feel. And my therapist pretty much takes it from there. But just keep in mind that therapy is also a journey. So it really is just what you put into it. That's what you're going to get out of it. So you have to be like real and raw. And also, like, all therapists aren't perfect. You have to find the right match. So if you're going to therapy and you feel like it's not working, it's not that therapy doesn't work. You may just need a different therapist. So that's my answer to your question.
Thank you for taking time to answer that. Tiffany says, I call it work-life harmony or integration.
Right. A lot of people say the work-life balance. I see Cortez put it in there, but I call it work-life harmony. The balance piece is tough. Integration, harmony, the piece side of it is, I think, from that perspective. So that would be one thing I would say. Language-wise, I would change work-life balance. Yeah, but let's switch to work-life harmony, work-life integration. Like, how are you trying to be able to integrate yourself through it versus the mindset of the balance piece and stuff. So
yeah,
that's a very good point, Tiffany.
Yeah, I would add into that, like, balance in itself is very, very hard to achieve. For me, I would honestly say that it's almost impossible to actually achieve a good work-life balance, especially when you have little ones. There's always something that needs to be done. So there's always something that you have to catch, like you're trying to juggle 3 or 4 different things, like your family, your house, your bills, your job, your own sanity. And every one of these things is just getting thrown up into the air. And it's just, at any point in time, something is falling or needs to be caught and tossed back, so balance is a very hard thing. But I always say it's good to just strive as hard as you can in order for you to achieve that balance, even though it may be something that is pretty much impossible. But making sure that you take care of yourself along with that process so that you can get through it.
So for myself, I don't know if anyone else can resonate, but I am my own worst critic. And growing in my engineering journey, I would tell myself that don't let a closed door or a challenge, obstacle distract you from meeting your goal. There are plenty of internships I wish I received, I didn't get, or job offers I wish I got, but I did not get. But now that I look back onto that, those closed doors are actually blessings in disguise. So within our journey, your journey, there are going to be a lot of closed doors, but keep striving, keep moving to that goal you have in mind.
It's a great point. Self, I would say that you are not your past traumas. Because I definitely believe that, everybody is just a combination of like their past occurrences, like everything that's happened in their life. Like, like you have your life and you have your perception of your life and how you think it's actually gone and what it's actually done to you. for me, I believe that that has slightly limited or enhanced some abilities that I've had during my tenure of college. Believing what I might have been told about myself around that point, and having to actually overcome that over time. Like now that I'm looking back at it, I'm just like, wow, like there's different things that I would have done at that point in time. Like I would have volunteered more. I would have showed up to more things. I would have made more friends, made more connections. I would have traveled more. I would have worked more. Like there's just so many different things that I would have done. But overall, I would say the number one thing I would tell myself is that I'm not my past, and every day can be made new. Every day I can strive forward towards something that is great, and ultimately it'll all be okay. Again, else that we would like to add in here?
Oh, just that I wish to start early with getting mentors and sponsors and difference between them, understanding difference. Mentors will definitely advise you, but then the sponsor, someone speaking on your behalf while you're not in the room. So just starting early would be good to what I would say to myself. So.
And fail forward. That's another thing I would definitely say. All right, so I guess we've reached the end of this discussion. So I want to just take some time to say that I appreciate everyone for coming through to this roundtable discussion here with EMI. Once again, my name is Matthew Douglas. I'm the operations leader with the Engineering Management Institute. I want you all to take some time to copy over this QR code over here at the top. We're trying to get some survey data so that we can make more roundtable discussions like this one and some other ones that we're planning for the future. We would really like to have some input from every one of you guys, the participants, and also the panelists. So if you guys could fill out that survey as soon as you can, that'd be greatly appreciated. This video, this webinar will actually be posted on our social media platforms in due time. So please keep a lookout for it. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and I believe also Twitter. So if you want to tune into any one of those channels, then you are more than free to. The panelists can also be found on LinkedIn and also via the landing page for this webinar. So feel free to give them a follow. Panelists, if you guys have anything that you want to share, books, Tiffani, and also Richard. If you would like to share in any one of those resources, you guys are more than free to connect, and let's actually make a family out of this and stay in touch for the future. I'm pretty sure that on this webinar, there have been some people that might have learned some things, and we want to make sure that we're cultivating an environment where some of the listeners are able to tell some other people to join in to these conversations where they've actually learned something, and we can all really build together. So once again, take some time to scan that QR code. This will be on our social media platforms pretty soon, and I appreciate you all for coming through.